people a long way back knew that VR and AR is going to change the world at some point. And we're just starting to see that now. But I wanted to go back and just remind ourselves of some of the pioneers of what we see today and what we're starting to take for granted. And some pretty humbling, actually. That's a guy in the 1970s. I know this looks like a GoPro put to someone's head, but this is in the 1970s. In the 1970s, people were daring to dream that virtual reality could exist. That's a headset from the 1990s that bears remarkable resemblance to a lot of the integrated technology and tethered technology we see today. This doesn't. This is something different. This is someone wearing a headset with a controller that looks like a remote. Again, this is in the 1990s. This next one's really interesting. This is a slide from the 90s, from a deck in the 90s that someone presented, talking about how VR is based on 3 decades of research. So that was in the 90s, so therefore they were talking about the 1960s, which is 50 years ago. So 50 years ago, people dared to dream that VR could change the world. Again, this is someone in the 90s, and this is someone in the 80s using VR to do something very important, and I know that it's going to resonate with you all, which is drive an underwater submarine. So that's I wanted to share those things with you because they are very humbling, and it shows that while we think that we're at the beginning of a curve and we're at the beginning of a moment, actually, I think we're in the latter stages of one of the longest technology arcs that we've been part of. But it's coming. It's coming soon. It's forecasted to hit $120 billion in value by 2020. That's generally split kind of 90 AR and 30 VR. In comparison, just to put that into context, the 2016 global game software revenue market is $90 billion, right? So $90 billion is what global games are today. $120 billion is what analysts project VR and AR to be in 2020. And this chart shows a convenient linear growth rate from now to 2020. But that's not going to happen. A linear growth rate isn't what's going to happen, and it's not what we're seeing either. The prediction, certainly the prediction that we have at Unity, is that we're going to see this. VR and AR is going to start slower than some predict for a number of reasons, most notably cost and content. And some may even say, while this is happening, that AR and VR are fizzling out, that it's just not getting traction, despite things like a $23 billion market cap increase for people like Nintendo, because they dared to do something different with AR in mobile. So despite that, people are going to be hitting VR and AR for a while, saying, well, it's fizzling out, it's not happening. So it's just not living up to the hype. That's what people will say. So we'll see this gap of disappointment between perception and between reality. And it will be real, but in the end, it will be fairly meaningless. Because just like all those people knew 30, 40 years ago when they were testing the limits of VR, we need to recognize what we have, that we are in this once-in-a-generation introduction of new tech so compelling that it will change everything. So the analyst reports are meaningless. The fact that we're going to go through a gap of disappointment is meaningless because the reality is we will get to a point where VR and AR will change everything. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about my point there about this is a once-in-a-generation moment. If you're in this room, then thank you, number one. Secondly, if you're in this room, I hope you're here to see me and it's not a mistake. But if you're in this room, you might be a believer. You might be a believer. I know some people are a believer. I know, Richard, you're a believer. There's believers. There's believers in VR and AR. Or you might be continuing to seek reassurance that the investment that you've made already in your time are right. Or that your potential investment is sane, despite what people are telling you. Well, you're right, because like every major step change in technology, the early pioneers, maybe like you, who gritted it out, they faced high risk but supremely high reward. And this is a step change in technology. this is what we're seeing. And I put it up there with the other great step changes in technology that civilization has seen. Like this, right? These are the others. These are the others, and I put VR and AR up with these. And I'm just going to talk through some of these because we take all of these for granted in the way that one day we'll take VR and AR for granted. We all take electricity for granted, but there was a point in time in humanity when you couldn't do stuff when it was dark without the aid of fire. And electricity kind of changed that. It's changed many other things since then, but it kind of changed that. People were able to work at night and do things at night. It changed people's lives. The combustion engine, that changed people's lives because the advent of the car and the plane and everything else, it allowed people to do things with more of their time. It allowed people to travel to other places and be in other places quicker. There's a theme going on here. Television, it turned the written into visual and it summoned the golden age of advertising. PC optimized workflows and did so many other things for time optimization. The internet, you all know about the internet, I don't need to tell you about that. And smartphones. Smartphones opened up time in the day because it gave us a power in our hands that we could use whenever we damn chose to use it. It changed people's use of the most important thing in their lives, which is time. And that's the common thread through all of the great changes in technology. They all had supremely powerful outcomes on humanity. And similarly, so will VR and AR. The kind of impact that VR and AR is going to have is at some point between now and 10 years from now, I am confident, and it's just an opinion held by me and Unity and many others in the VR and AR community, that 1 billion people a day will experience VR and AR. They will consume things in VR and AR. And the reason why adoption and use will explode to those levels is fundamentally straightforward. There's going to come a time when VR and AR will make your life better. That's the reason why it will get mass adoption. Because like all of the other things that I just mentioned, it will make your life better. It will make it richer. It will make your time more valuable. And why is it going to do that? Well, the simple yet oh so powerful hint on why it's going to do that is actually in the name. Virtual reality, augmented reality. Right? And we kind of go past that sometimes because we throw it around really meaninglessly. But this allows us to make more realities. And when you can do that, as we can now in this once-in-a-generation moment, we're going to be capable of being able to transport humans to other very real places instantly. Now just imagine what you can do if you can make other realities have presence and meaning. Right? Imagine how that unlocks education, design, socializing, communication, healthcare, travel, entertainment, or every other pursuit on the planet and off this planet where you spend time. They'll all be accessible anytime by anyone. Can you imagine being able to just go to any reality that you want and how that will impact people's lives? That's why we're going to see mass adoption to the scale that we're forecasting of 1 billion people. Now, how close are we to mass adoption? Well, I think we're closer than ever. And I think mobile is leading the way. Now, this is no disrespect to the excellent Rift, to the Vive, to PlayStation VR, which is just putting immense power in the hands of gamers very affordably. They can and they will have deep communities of customers. But I actually believe that it's mobile that will speed these new realities to a voluminous amount of people on the world. That's consequential, right? And consequence for me starts at about 1 billion, right? So that's what the thought is. And it began with Google Cardboard. And through January 2016, over 5 million cardboards have shipped, and there's been over 1,000 compatible applications. Gear VR, Oculus have said, has 1 million users in April. And then more recently, Google announced Daydream, which is going to bring a controller, lighter weight, and be more portable and accessible and approachable. Facebook 360 was introduced in June. And while you don't need to use a headset, there are 2 important things that are happening with Facebook 360, which again ties into kind of the accessibility and the education around mass adoption. The first is it gets users to move around in a 360 space, which is a new convention for people. And secondly, it can be used with both Gear VR and the Rift. It gets the masses comfortable with VR step by step. And finally, more recently, AR's hit the mainstream with this title, Pokemon Go. Yes, right. I've been trying to catch them all day. Now, we're in the midst of one of the meme moments of 2016. I think it will sustain, and very likely one of the most widely used apps on mobile to date, even surpassing some social networks with its use. So, the point is, all of these things strung together means that we're already seeing very real signs of life, right? We're already seeing very real signs of life that AR, later VR, is becoming acceptable as a medium, as a convention for people to interact with and get used to. Because this is massive adoption on a global scale. And there's more to come, despite us being in that gap of disappointment. This product alone could easily get to 10% of that 1 billion consumption number that I mentioned earlier. Right? It's well on its way to 100 million people a day playing this. And that's early on in the cycle. And for you keen watchers out there, you will realize that this is Bellsprout. He's about to get captured. Right? And I was trying to create my own meme because this is actually Bellsprout in the presentation that I'm making for today. Right? That's how much effort I went into. The fact that I gave a crap about that speaks huge amounts about this product. Because, hey, we've all seen people. We've seen people on the street with this product, dads and mothers with their sons and daughters playing this game. I pass legions of them every night in downtown San Francisco trying to catch this. So this is becoming known. This is becoming acceptable. Right? This is one of the moments that's going to punctuate the gap of disappointment just to continue to show the way that we are on that right arc. Now, if you want to be part of this generational moment, to stake your claim in VR and AR, what do you need to start thinking about? And here's some quick thoughts that I wanted to get to you if you're thinking about moving into this space, rather than this just being conceptual today. So the first is this. Technology ferries imagination closer to reality, and 3D modeling is a critical part of what will make VR and AR real. It's like pulling out the multi-dimensional images from your mind and painting them on paper to see how it looks. So having skills in Max and Maya will be super useful. It's good to know how to build something, to unwrap it and texture it. So I think if you're interested in getting into VR and AR, you should learn 3D modeling. Coding is essential because if you want to be able to have interactions, you're going to have to be able to script. And for now, there's no way around it. So kind of learn some coding. Now, the master rule, remember the master rule, is there are no rules. At this point in the VR experience, people are just trying to figure out what can work and what doesn't. So you have to take chances, you have to try new things, and you don't let yourself be constrained by what you think will work. That's the worst thing to do in this moment, is to think about what might work. Just free yourself from the conventions that you already know. And because there are no rules, you have to remember that you're going to make mistakes. So you have to be aware that some things will work, some things won't. And it's hard to say what people are going to like or not. So get used to making mistakes. You'll make more mistakes if you're going into VR and AR than you've ever made in your game-making career if you're making a game. And lastly, you're going to need a game engine, which is just so happens is what Unity provides, conveniently. So, if you don't mind, give me 30 seconds. Unity today already equips the world of creators with the ability to make wonderful things. And the wonderful things that are made by Unity are downloaded 1.6 billion times a month. That's like 600 downloads a minute. Actually, that's not wrong. My math's terrible. It's a second. 600 a second. About a third of the top 1,000 grossing games on the planet are made with Unity. We're very humbled by that. And we've got 6.5 million developers. I've got 5 minutes left. That's great. And 1.5 million people use it every single month. So we got here, though, by standing with developers and for developers, by democratizing development, by solving hard problems at moments like these, in pioneer moments, and by enabling success for other creators. We've invested heavily in supporting VR and AR at this moment in time so that creators can utilize their creativity to the right place. So we started with Google, with Cardboard. Like I said, 50 million Cardboard to date. Then we moved on to the Gear VR. Then we powered Oculus Rifts. Then we powered PlayStation VR. And so, we're supporting all of the main platforms that are in this race to carve out and stake a claim in VR and AR. So we're really excited about that. Now some design considerations. I wanted to talk to you about design. Very important to think about that when you're considering how to make something in VR and AR. Firstly, you got to think about the context of how and where your users consume. So everything from offering user interfaces that are simple and intuitive to removing redundant content. Remember that who you're talking to isn't always you. That's actually a master line for anyone making a game. And they may be at a much different level of understanding. You've got to optimize the experience. And this is new, so don't forget to test and get user feedback. It's really important. Don't do it in a vacuum. Not everything is going to work. Tell a story. It's one of the least understood aspects of VR and AR. It's not because people don't know how to tell stories. It's just that you're creating in a non-linear environment. And you have to think about things like the bubblegum dilemma. If you make an environment with a table in VR and AR, people are going to look under the table for bubblegum, right? So you need to understand what you're going to do when someone does that, right? So you need to be prepared for that. You're telling a story in a new convention. And lastly, give people an exit. It seems obvious, but VR is a really different world. Something like Job Simulator from Alchemy, that did a really good job of giving people an exit. When you wanted to exit, a suitcase arrived, you opened the suitcase, there was a burrito in it that said, exit. You had to grab the burrito, eat the burrito, and then you exited the game. Just wonderful delight using the new convention of VR and AR. So you have to think about that. Okay, so where's this going? Finally, where is this going? What's over the horizon past this pioneer moment, past this moment of testing, of failing, of gritting it out, and getting it right for a piece of this future? Well, there's many ways to describe where this is going, but the thing that resonated with me most was this. And if you haven't read this book, then read this book. Who's read this book? That's great. That's why you're in this room. Now, this is a really dystopian view of the future, right? So you have to peer through that, but it does show very plainly a future where everyone is connected in other realities of their choosing. And they're schooled in VR, they're employed in VR, they're entertained in VR. Virtual reality is real in this book, and real is virtual reality. So the crossover has happened. And the key idea is that instead of just one world and one reality, there will be millions more. This pioneer moment is about exploring the first genesis points of what these worlds and realities can be, about why they should exist. We will spend time hanging out in this metaverse, creating new worlds and moving through worlds that others are creating. It's a forever changing place only limited by people's imaginations. And every company, every group in the world will eventually be in it. Now, great content is going to drive adoption. It always does. Content is and always has been king. And that's where you come in. That's where the creators of tomorrow comes in, because it's here, it's real, and the opportunity is waiting for people like you to dream to invent something that we haven't thought about. Eventually, everyone will be in this place. So my advice is get there first, because it's going to be worth it. Thank you.
You were talking about future of VR, and where do you see spherical video and volumetric video in this future?
Ooh, where do I see spherical video and volumetric video?
Yeah.
Well, I see them as component parts of some of these verticals that I've talked about. I mean, they match some of the genres that are going to be big. So, I think I'd love to talk to you a bit more about it offline, because it's a huge answer. But I think the bottom line is the future of this is made up of many technological component parts, like spherical video, which are going to be relevant in some areas and irrelevant in others. So that would be my baseline aggregate answer. But we should talk more at the end, because it's a really big answer. Okay, thanks for spending this reality with me. See you soon.